Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Sarah Wong. Our top stories tonight. A former editor of Xi'an News appears in court as Carrie defends the arrest of 7 people with ties to the website. A minimum size for flats is set for a project in Tuen Mun. And there's concern about the first possible local transmission of Omicron in Hong Kong. Chief Executive Carrie has defended the arrest of 7 people connected with the online site Xi'an News, saying the law must not be broken under the guise of journalism. A court denied bail to 2 of them, Tuen Mun and Patrick Lam, as they await their next court date in February. Wong has the details.
Former Xi'an News editor Tuen Mun was the focus of a media scrum upon his arrival at West Kowloon Magistracy this afternoon. His former colleague, acting editor-in-chief Patrick Lam, remains in hospital for high blood pressure and was represented by his lawyer instead. The pair were charged with conspiring to publish seditious publications. They were the first of 7 people linked to the online platform to appear in court following their arrests yesterday. Xi'an News shut down after they were detained and disappeared from the web in a matter of hours. Its office in England also ceased operations, according to Bureau Chief Yang Tin-shui. This morning, Chief Executive Carrie stood by the police action.
What the law enforcement agencies have done, including the police, in arresting people who are suspicious of committing offences under the Crimes Ordinance or the National Security Law, is their legitimate duty.
Her comment followed criticism over the arrests. The Foreign Correspondents Club called it a further blow to press freedom. There was also condemnation from the West, with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken urging the authorities to cease targeting Hong Kong's free and independent media. Journalism is not sedition, he declared.
Well, I agree with that. Journalism is not sedition, but seditious acts and activities and inciting other people through public acts and activities could not be condoned under the guise of news reporting. It should be very clear what is reporting of news and what is seditious acts or activities to undermine national security.
Police are said to be looking for Xi'an News founder Tony Choi, who has apparently relocated to Australia. Wong, HKIBC.
One of the 7 people linked with Xi'an News, Canton pop singer Denise Ho, has been released on bail. She stepped out of Western Police Station this evening. Ho was a director of the online platform's parent company until June. Margaret Ng and Christine Fan, who were also detained yesterday, were seen leaving police stations today. In a bid to prevent new homes from getting even smaller, the government has introduced a minimum floor area for a residential development in Tuen Mun. None of the 2,000 units to be built will be under 280 square feet. Raymond Young tells us more.
The government's 2016 census put the median flat size at 430 square feet, but that no longer reflects the current situation. That's because developers have resorted to building so-called nano flats. In 2019, 1 in 8 new homes measured 260 square feet or smaller. 2 months after describing the downsizing trend as a pain point for society, Development Chief Michael Wong responded by mandating a minimum floor area for a future project. This 3.4-hectare site at the former Siu Lam San Chun in Tuen Mun will go under the hammer as part of the 4th quarter land sale program. It will churn out around 2,000 units, and each must not be smaller than 280 square feet or 26 square meters.
In reaching the figure of 26 square meters, we've looked at the subsidized housing project at Anderson Road. In that case, the minimum flat size is 23 square meters. So it's basically 10% above that. Given the position of private housing, on the home ownership ladder. We believe it's one rung up.
Another development undertaken by the MTR Corporation in Tuen Mun will also have a minimum floor area of 280 square feet. Wong hinted the rule could become a regular feature in future tenders. The measure comes hours after Chief Executive Carrie tightened resale restrictions for subsidized homes. Future subsidized flats cannot be sold above cost price for 5 years, up from 2 years currently. The adjustment followed calls to weed out speculators trying to make a quick profit using government resources. Raymond Yang, HKIBC.
The chief executive has admitted that time is running out for her to implement hundreds of proposals in her policy address, but expressed confidence it would be done by the next administration. And once again, Carrie dodged questions on whether she'll run for another term of office. More from Raymond Yang.
As her 5-year term winds down to the final 6 months, Carrie set her priorities straight. In a wide-ranging press conference, the chief executive announced that her goal is to launch a debate and consultation for Article 23 legislation before her term expires on June 30th.
I just don't see, even by looking at the calendar and calculating the sittings, I just don't see how that could be accomplished. But I have heard some electrical members-elect expressing the desire that they will cooperate in order to expedite the passing of a legislation. I certainly welcome that, but I would still adhere importance to a more thorough discussion in society before we enact the law.
She'll also require the cooperation of lawmakers to restructure the government. First laid out in her policy address, Lam said details will be tabled in the first electrical meeting on January 12th, with a final proposal ready by the end of March. Away from politics, the SAR leader said she is very optimistic that Hong Kong residents can soon travel to the mainland quarantine-free. But she again refused to be drawn into discussions on whether she will run for a second term. As far as I know, the nomination period of the chief executive election starts on February 15th. That is some time away from now, she said. But she pointed out there is very strong continuity between administrations and was not worried about her work not being followed up. Raymond Yang, HKIBC.
There are fears that a highly contagious Omicron variant has transmitted in the community. At least one diner at a Kowloon restaurant where an Omicron patient had visited was said to have contracted COVID. Mun Palace shut down this afternoon, and staff were put under medical surveillance. A Cathay Pacific cargo crew member who had dined at a restaurant on Monday tested positive later. He was one of 11 people who were confirmed today to have the Omicron strain, taking Hong Kong's tally to 81. The city also reported another 12 imported COVID infections. On the mainland, new local COVID cases rose yesterday to 156, all but one in Xi'an. That took the tally in the Xi'an Delta outbreak to 1,117. The only other case was detected in Fangchenggang City in Guangxi Province. This came as alleged violators of COVID restrictions were named and shamed in nearby Jingxi City. 4 men wearing hazmat suits and bearing placards showing their names and photos were paraded on the street. The authorities accused them of smuggling people across China's sealed borders and hoped that shaming them in public would be a deterrent. The World Health Organization has called for a concerted effort to end the COVID pandemic next year. This came as the United States and Europe continue to report record daily infections. Continents straddling the Atlantic continue to see record daily upticks as the Omicron variant crumbles defenses against COVID. The United States recorded a daily average of over 277,000 cases in the past week, while infections hit a new high of 183,000 in Britain. But Belgium has reopened theaters and cinemas, while Italy, Spain, and Australia ignored advice from the World Health Organization and eased isolation and testing requirements. The WHO is worried that rising caseloads driven by the Omicron and Delta strains could overwhelm hospitals. It also fears that a pandemic could rage throughout next year if vaccine inequality and skepticism are still entrenched.
While 2021 has been hard, I ask everyone to make a New Year's resolution to get behind the campaign to vaccinate 70% by the middle of 2022.
But there are signs that Omicron could bring the prolonged fight against the pandemic to an end. The latest research from South Africa, where the new strain was first reported, suggested Omicron could trigger stronger protection against the Delta variant. As a result, the less severe Omicron could displace Delta and blunt the destructive impact of COVID on public health and daily lives. Since the global pandemic began 2 years ago, the virus has infected 285 million people and killed over 5.4 million, with 3.5 million deaths this year alone. Close to 60% of the world population has received at least one jab, but the figure drops drastically to 8.4% in low-income countries. And coming up after the break. The former girlfriend of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein is convicted of sex trafficking.